Andres, you play a lot of instruments, right?
Poorly, yeah. Ukulele, tiny bit of guitar.
Multi-instrumentalist.
Drums, but not very well. So.
But in my mind, I was going to ask whether have you ever done like proper composing, like on a piece of paper with notation?
God, no.
And all that.
No. We used to write songs in a circle and just kind of remember chord progressions. And
sorry, when you said write them in a circle, you mean it was a circular piece of paper?
No, that's a good idea.
No, you'd sit in a circle.
No, we'd sit in a circle with 3-4 people and just jam, like improvise, and then take something and turn it into a song. Yeah.
What was it? Please tell me there was a campfire in the middle of the circle.
Occasionally, yeah, or a wood stove if we're inside in the winter, something like that. Yeah.
So cool.
Or a carved effigy of a primitive god.
Yeah, they call it woodshedding.
Pardon?
They call it woodshedding.
Woodshedding.
Yeah. Because you're playing out in someone's woodshed or something like that and making noise where...
Letting it rip.
Yeah, exactly.
If that was a thing in Britain, that would definitely mean something
I
sexual.
know it would be like dogging and cottaging. Yeah, you guys have those great terms for that, yeah.
Really, pretty much every British slang term for anything probably means something sexual, doesn't it?
Welcome, everyone, to the Two Real Cinema Club. My name is Andres Lorente.
And I'm James Rosican. And every episode on the Two Real Cinema Club, we watch two movies. We watch a new movie and we watch an old movie. And then we try and figure out, well, does anything connect these two movies? Why on earth did we choose them? Why are we talking about them? And this week, it's not just the two of us you have to listen to. We have a guest.
We do, and it's a good thing we have a guest because our number one doctor, Dr. James Rosica, is currently patient 0, sounding a little ill. So we've got backup. We've brought her in. You've heard her voice, her lovely, lovely voice before. She's a screenwriter, a teacher, and she's been along for the ride in the past. You remember her from last year when we reviewed Wakanda and Quilombo, our Portuguese expert. And our...
It was Wakanda Forever, wasn't it?
It was Wakanda.
Which is a measure of how long the film went on.
Oh, my God. It did. It's still echoing in my brain. Wakanda goes on forever. She's been along for the ride as the third reel of the Two Real Cinema Club in the past, and we've invited her again, and we were very surprised to hear her say yes, she would join us. Ladies and gentlemen, Ines Braga, welcome to the pod.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be back. And yes, I think you need me a lot after Jimmy being so ill. That's the only reason why you called me back, right? As a backup. Yeah. I'm very happy to.
So we feel really... But we have literally dragged you away from the beach to be on the podcast, haven't we?
What a drag. It was great. It was a New Year's Eve tradition, but this year was easier. Last year was dreadful, but this year was sunny and nice, and the water was warm, so I was very lucky. So lovely to jump in the water and now have this very insightful podcast to come to. Especially the parts that you talk.
One of those two things is going to be disappointing. Right. So tonight, we are going to gather around the piano. Then we gather in a circle, sing a few songs, and then follow it up with a knife fight. That's an average evening in my house. We have watched the new Leonard Bernstein biopic, Maestro, out now on Netflix, and we're going to line it up for a street punk dance-off against, the kind of film within a film from that film. We're going to line it up with 1961's West Side Story. Are you guys still singing the songs? I am.
Yeah.
I am now, anyway.
Constantly.
I actually have the original soundtrack on vinyl, so I've been listening to it as well.
Wow.
Yeah. I've just started listening to vinyl again, set up my new stereo system, and that was one of the first things I put on.
Wow.
So you are literally living your life in reverse, aren't you? Haven't you recently got rid of your big TV and you got rid of your surround sound, and now you're listening to music on vinyl?
Well, yeah, wax recordings.
It'll be a gramophone next.
Yes, exactly.
Brilliant, but it's such a great. Honestly, I was listening to it, and it's so moving, isn't it? First of all, it really doesn't. It just so catchy, and the songs are just so powerful and iconic that I have so many memories of singing along with my parents, watching the movie with my dad. I think we all have these memories of our youth. And it was just such an incredible film. I think, we won't talk about it too much now. We'll leave it to later. But the songs really, right. I think it's a testament to his genius, isn't it? I think Leonard Bernstein was really, really incredible, like a visionary.
Well, speaking of Bernstein...
Did I call him Bernstein? No, Bernstein.
Yeah, Lenny Bernstein. Absolutely. So this film is called Maestro. And it's directed by Bradley Cooper, who also wrote it, with Josh Singer, who wrote more recently, I guess, Spotlight and The Post, a couple of newspaper films, and First Man, which I did not see.
It's the Damien Chazelle film, isn't it? I haven't seen that. Is it a space film?
It is.
It doesn't strike me as a film that plays to Damien Chazelle's strength.
Yeah, it's about, I think, the first lunar landing in 1969, or how they got there anyway.
Right, so no jazz instruments at all, presumably, in that film.
No, a lot of technical instruments, but no musical instruments that I know of. Which is interesting because his first film, which was the drumming film,
Whiplash.
Yes, that's it. Drumming, and then La La Land, of course, musical. So, I mean, he's a tertiary character in this, but he did work with Josh Singer, and Josh Singer also worked on the great American television series West Wing. So he's got some credits to his name. I have this pegged at approximately $80 million worth of film.
Really?
Earning a little under $400,000 thus far, according to IMDb. So,
gosh, really?
That's because I think it had a limited series, limited theatrical run. The film feels a lot like award season fodder, doesn't it? Like you've got some big actors and big directors, big production, and yet it went to Netflix fairly soon in its release.
Premiered at Venice. It was nominated for like a Golden Lion. It didn't win, but there was a big Venice buzz, which is normally very good for awards, isn't it?
Feels like an awards season film to me. Features Carey Mulligan as well as Leonard Bernstein's wife, Felicia Montealegre. Maya Hawke is their daughter, I think their oldest daughter, and Sarah Silverman is also in there as well. Big thing for Bradley Cooper, obviously a labor of love, having written it, produced it, directed it, acted in it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note, I didn't know this before, but I read that it was actually Steven Spielberg who gave him the shot, basically. Like very much Leonard Bernstein, who started because of the illness of the actual conductor. I think this one was basically... Spielberg was going to do it. Well, I think Scorsese was initially attached to the project, and then he went off to do Irishman, and he gave it to Spielberg, and Spielberg then went off to shoot West Side Story, and offer it to him after watching A Star Is Born.
I haven't seen A Star Is Born, but it is also a film about two talented people, one of whom overshadows the other. Isn't that right?
Ooh.
Very much.
Do you see a theme emerging?
Yes, there is a trend.
And how does The Hangover fit into that theme exactly? This film opens in color on Leonard Bernstein, old and alone at a piano, slowly revealing a camera crew filming him, thinking of and talking of his wife Felicia Montealegre, and quoting her in... For me, what is kind of a red herring of a theme, he says that she said to him, "If summer doesn't sing in you, nothing sings in you. And if nothing sings in you, you can't make music." We quickly go to black and white, and what I think is the money shot of the whole film. It's this sort of closed apartment shade, and it looks to me like a theater curtain, and he holds on this image. You're in darkness for quite a while, but it really looks like a stage that's being lit from behind as they do it at night, but the curtain is pulled shut. It's a still shot that starts moving after a very long take. It reveals more and more, and it actually is, at one point, a theater that Leonard Bernstein runs into because he's been notified that he has to conduct on short notice to cover for the musical conductor. Is it Bruno Walter or someone like that who has fallen ill?
Walter.
He basically takes that opportunity and he becomes a conductor. He does very, very well, and sort of where you see immediately Bradley Cooper is just incarnation of Leonard Bernstein. He just walks beautifully like Bernstein. He conducts very well. He has the nose of Bernstein. He speaks like Bernstein. So he does a great job inhabiting this character. And we start to see bits of his friendships with Jerome Robbins and Aaron Copland. And we also see that he's clearly in love with, well, men, but also cigarettes. And early on, David Oppenheim, who's I think a clarinetist, he appears to be Bernstein's lover, and I think we see that opening scene starts with them sort of in bed. He gets the phone call. He's basically given the opportunity he can't refuse, and it's sort of answering the call, the ringing of the bell, and it leads him to quite a bit of fame in the world of orchestral music. Mm-hmm. Soon after, he meets Felicia Montalegre, and this is kind of one of James's favorite film moments, I think, because they clearly have been getting to know each other at a party. They're inhaling cigarettes and one another's backgrounds. As they review what they've learned, there's some blatant and unapologetic exposition known to Dr. Razika as, "Let me tell you who you are." Is that right, James?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my God!
So basically,
I wrote.
Yeah.
I wrote it. I wrote in my notes. This is not a meet cute. This is a meet dull.
Well, I think all the smoking was what had my attention, but you get all the information of where they come from. She's sort of this elegant actress who comes from, I think she's Costa Rican. Obviously has a London.
Originally, I think she's Costa Rican, and then she moved to Chile. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's just very international, very cosmopolitan. He's this up and coming conductor, as we know, but they sort of tell each other who they are, and the theme statement emerges in this moment. The world wants us to be only one thing. Isn't that deplorable? And that the whole film, I would argue that there's sort of a central irony in this film because it sort of begins to view Leonard mostly as his sexual life, I think, and a little bit less as a conductor, composer, and a musician. So there's obviously this theme that's going to run throughout. She's an actor. He's a musician. They're both successful. They fall in love fast, and they live in this agreement that he can play around with men and boys, and she can be his beard. And though complaining of not being able to be who he is due to the times, I guess, he embraces hiding in society in order to be happy, I guess. And Felicia points out, "You don't know how much you need me, do you?" So she sort of acts as a guardian to him. The film sort of shifts to color at this point. He conducts, she watches, she supports. He should be composing. And then there's this big 70s party where she sees him flirting around with a younger man and kissing him. And she tells him he's getting sloppy. And then the argument sort of emerges, again, supporting this theme throughout the film of, she says to him, "Don't you dare tell the truth. Your truth is a lie."
Should we ring the spoiler bell, do you think?
Yeah, I think this is about the point where I would ring a spoiler bell. Or maybe some sort of chime from the orchestra would be more appropriate for this episode.
Ah, yes, a tubular spoiler bell. Yes, absolutely. I especially want to ring that because I don't want to spoil, for people who haven't seen the film, what is maybe my favourite moment in the whole film, which is exactly that scene you were talking about, where they're having this very heartfelt argument, and then just as the argument comes to a close, an enormous inflatable Snoopy ambles past the window.
I love that scene as well.
Right, spoil away.
Well, I would invite you two to spoil as well, because I only have a few more things to say on the film. But yeah, this is that crux of the whole story, is that they're supporting each other. They're at odds with one another about this sort of secrecy, this secret life he has to live, and how she supports it. And then they drift apart for a little bit, but they come back together when she's diagnosed with cancer, and they sort of end their lives together. And this film ends on a shot of Felicia, although it started on the shot of Bernstein. So it's, I open it up to you guys. I want to hear what you think about. We could start with that sort of end of Act One, or that argument that they have. But
I have one like very film schooly question. We often ask this question. I'd be interested to know what you both think. So we were all three at film school together, and one of the fundamental questions that we were always taught to ask is, whose story is it? Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, the difference between that opening image and the closing image, and it does raise this slight question: well, whose story is this? And I feel like the publicity is suggesting that it's Felicia's story, You know, and I think they want to try and kind of sell it as being just a story of Lenny's wife. But I kind of don't think it is, personally. But what do you guys think?
I'm not sure. You know, I think, it definitely is his movie, I feel. But even though I think Bradley Cooper wanted to sell it, or at least I think that's what he wanted it to be, like the anatomy of a marriage, you know, like looking into a complex marriage and the relationship between the two. I think initially Josh Singer's script was just about sort of a small period of Leonard Bernstein's life, I think in the 70s. Like they just chose about 10 years to chronicle about 10 years of his life, and then Bradley Cooper came on and decided to focus on the relationship, and I think that was quite smart. But on the other hand, I feel that's at the expense of having us care more deeply about them, because I feel there's a sort of a distance. I don't know. It's like there's a superficiality about it that made me feel a bit distant at times, even though I really love their relationship. And I think the acting is so wonderful. And technically, I think, you know, aesthetically, the film is beautiful. You know, that opening shot, you know, the climax scene of the Gustav Mahler symphony is just incredible. You know, you really have these amazing cinematic moments. And I think the POV shifts, I think, you know, as I think Andres said, you know, it starts with Leonard Bernstein and then it finishes with Felicia. So it's almost like, you know, it's both their story, I guess is what he tries to say. But I felt it wasn't really her story, because it was always a reaction to his actions, right? We didn't really follow her story. It was always how she acted and reacted based on what he did and his betrayals. We never really saw her, even though she's very strong and, you know, an incredible character. But yeah, I didn't really feel she was the leading POV of the film.
I mean, the film starts before she gets there, doesn't it? And the film carries on after she has left.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it's called Maestro for a reason, isn't it? It's about the Maestro.
Yeah.
It's not Lenny and Felicia.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I would guess that polling somehow indicated that women weren't interested in going to see the film. So the publicity lent harder on this idea. Oh, yes, this is a woman's film about a woman's story. It's for women. Come on, women, buy tickets. And I'm guessing that's kind of why we've ended up with that slant. Because I think watching the film in the absence of that publicity, I feel like it's his story.
Yeah, completely. And that film was in development for years and it wasn't getting made. So perhaps that was why, you know, then he changed it and made it this, you know, about this complex modern love.
I think they give themselves quite a difficult task, because it's sort of this dangerous double biopic. Yeah. And you sort of have double the trouble with about equal time. And I think they don't show you very much of her life professionally. You see a little bit of acting here and there. And I don't know how you know, successful an actress she was, but she has some reputation as being good. And then, ironically, you don't get a lot of Bernstein doing his work. I think there's a minimum that you've got to show him doing. He doesn't do a lot of composition. He talks about it. We see a couple of fantastic performances where Bradley Cooper is conducting orchestras, but you don't really see him as the artist that he is. And a lot of the story is about where does the artist end and the person begin, and where's the outer life and the inner life of a character. And it's funny because you don't get many bits that help us with either part of that personality in either person. So it's one of these stories where, James, I would say I don't really know whose story it is. I think it's almost like it's the audience's story. We're going to get a glimpse into these lives that we wouldn't get otherwise, but we don't get too much detail on either one. And I think the thing that troubled me was that the scenes didn't really add up. There were a lot of beautiful little scenes, but they didn't feel like they progressed from one to the next with the consistency that told me what the real story is. So I come away with a couple of very solid themes, I think, and we can go into that in a minute, but I couldn't tell you that it's her story, if it's called Maestro, or if it's his story, if he's not being a maestro in the film called Maestro.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting, right? Because there was this dilemma, right, of who was he? Just a conductor or a composer? Could he be both? And we had a lot more emphasis on the maestro, on the conducting side, than we had on the composing side, I felt.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's why I said at the beginning, I think it almost reduces his life to this whole, covert sexuality and her supporting him in whatever he does and them having a successful marriage all the same. Even if they break up, they come back together at the end. So there's this sort of successful personal life. But you don't see a whole lot of their professional lives in a film that you sort of need that, I think, more than we got. But I mean, obviously, as I said, it's a tall task. If you attack the personal issues, that's one film. If you attack the personal issues of two people, that's almost two films. And if you do professional biopic styles of both of them, that's another two films. So it's a really a tall order to satisfy. I think they did a pretty good job, but it's a little convoluted, a little muddled as a result.
Yeah. God, Ines, I think I kind of really feel what you said earlier on about how there's a superficiality to what we see about their relationship. And because I that's exactly how I feel about it as well, actually. And I think I wonder the part of that comes from. I think that there's a number of scenes which I suspect are improvised between the two of them, which just don't feel particularly authentic to me. There's kind of scenes when the two of them are you're in bed together. There's like a black and white scene of the two of them in bed, and there's at least two scenes when they are leaning back to back, in the park, and.
Apparently, Jimmy, I will tell you, that happened at a retreat that Bradley Cooper organised, just him and her going away for a week or something. And the script was already written, but that scene of them sitting back to back arose during the retreat, and they loved it, and they inserted it and updated the script after that retreat. So
right.
Yes,
that really
spot
makes
on,
sense.
Ruzika.
It just feels like it's improvised between the two of them, because it just feels a little bit. I feel like there are scenes, aren't there, sometimes in movies where you think, I'm no longer seeing Lenny and Felicia. Now I am seeing Bradley and Carey.
Oh, yeah.
It's
quite
just
self-conscious, isn't it?
Yeah, it just doesn't quite feel authentic. You can sort of feel they're sort of feeling their way through the scene, or they're just tossing things out, but it's, they're not really kind of quite living the characters in the same way. And obviously, we on this podcast are biased. I don't think you can beat getting a writer to write your scenes rather than getting your actors to just make them up on the spot. But, call me old-fashioned.
Yeah. I agree. And also, it's very nice. Pick a number. There's this nice idea about it. But I felt those were two moments that should define who they were as people, but also who they were as couple. And they didn't do that. They didn't work at that level. It was just quite whimsical. Okay, fine. But that was it. But I'm sure lots of people will disagree, and they will love that scene.
I'll tell you what, I think one of my favorite scenes is actually one that probably doesn't require a lot of writing. It's Felicia's dying in bed.
Wow.
Lenny comes in to console her. At first, you think he's got some joke that he wants to play. He's dressed up as a doctor with a stethoscope and all that. Yeah. It doesn't work. She's in terrible shape. There's no language really in this scene, but there's this music of their synchronized breathing that starts to emerge. And hers is sort of cancer labored. His is tobacco compromised, but they're sort of harmonious in this breathing scene, and it's musical, and that's the end of her life. And that's a great scene. It probably relies a lot more on good acting and directing than it does on writing, but that's the kind of scene that works. And it's funny because it's a dying scene. It comes late in the film. There is more that comes after that. But, again, not a lot of writing, and it's not overdone. I could totally see that scene happening in real life, whether it did or not. And that's a great moment.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I agree. There was this sincerity about that moment, wasn't there? It was really, really special. It was one of my favorite scenes.
I think I wrote down two other scenes that I think were standouts. There's On the Town, which is like a real tonal shift for the film. Yeah. Lenny and Felicia go to a theatre and they're watching a rehearsal, but then they kind of step into the rehearsal, and the rehearsal kind of becomes like their own dance. And I thought that scene was just breathtaking. I loved it. I thought it was great. I wanted to see a bit more of that, frankly. Yeah. I was disappointed that there wasn't more of that kind of energy and experimentation.
Exactly.
And then
I agree.
Opposite of that, the other scene which I really liked was it's another black and white scene. Bernstein comes out of his apartment. Stein. I said it wrong. I told you I'd say it wrong, and I got it wrong.
You lived up to your promise, though.
Stein. Yeah. Lenny comes out of his apartment. Oh man, this is so embarrassing. He comes out of his apartment, and there is Oppenheim with his wife and daughter.
Yeah.
And they had, he does this kind of cute, slightly outrageous thing, and he tells the little baby, oh, slept with both your parents, ha ha. And straight after that, there is a scene of him and Oppenheimer just walking through the park in silence.
Yeah.
And I thought, the two of them walking together in silence, that's actually one of the most articulate scenes in the film. They are kind of comfortable being together in silence, but also there's a lot that's unspoken between them, and there's kind of a tension, and yet they've known each other for a long time, and there's this kind of sensation of a what if about this scene. I think that's a great scene with so many layers, and pretty much no dialogue at all. It's just it's a lovely scene, well played. Perhaps it's well played because it's so blank. We, the audience, are sort of allowed to read our own meaning on top of that.
Yeah. Exactly.
So there were some great scenes.
And it was quite moving, that scene, I felt. It was almost like, that could have been his, his love, the love of his life, and it wasn't. And, there was this, he was very good in it. I think, that scene was pretty special. I also like the scene when she appeared before the party, aesthetically, cinematically, when she comes out of the bus and just walk. There was some moments there that it felt like really classical cinema that I really enjoyed. There was a beauty to it, but it didn't really, of course, and the opening scene and the symphony, even though you can tell that the whole film is anchored around that resurrection climatic moment, and it does feel very staged, but I still had feelings, I still felt all the emotions that I bet Bradley Cooper wanted us to feel, the elation and the sadness and, the end, the utter genius and brilliance that he had, which is, incredible and made me feel quite emotional. It was just pure music in its most elevated state, wasn't it? I really enjoy that scene.
Friend of the pod, Spencer Brown, was telling me he was invited to a screening of the film. I think he's a member of the Directors Guild, which means that he gets invited to these great screenings, and I don't, because why would I be? So he went to a screening that was introduced by Bradley Cooper. So he saw the film, and then there was an interview with him afterwards, and Cooper was telling this anecdote about how they recorded that scene at Ely Cathedral, which is in the east of the UK. And they had time to do 2 takes before the end of the shooting day. So they did 2 takes, and they were kind of fine. And they scheduled some other shots for the second day of shooting. And on the morning of the second day, Bradley Cooper said, "Look, please let me I'm going to have one more, go at conducting this piece and doing this, one really long single take, because I just don't feel like I nailed it yesterday." And it gave it a third try. And apparently that is the version that's in the film. And Bradley Cooper says that one of the musicians in the orchestra came up to him after doing that third take in the morning, and he said, "I'm really glad you did that third take, because the 2 you did yesterday were awful."
I thought there would be many more takes, actually. I'm quite surprised that there were only 3. Because, the scene
I wonder whether it's such a technically challenging scene. Maybe it requires such a huge amount of setup that, actually, from a technical point of view, you just can't do it that many times in a day.
Yeah, and if you think about that, it's only his second film, right?
Yeah.
And conducting is very, very difficult, even on the best of days. And he does a wonderful job. I mean, obviously there was another conductor who really did most of the rehearsals with the orchestras and get them all ready, and Cooper was studying, I think, him as well as the orchestra itself and Bernstein. But it brings me to this point where that's a great scene and it's great work, but there's a whole lot of other story where you could have spent just as much time and money and maybe come away with a better film. The conducting scenes are fantastic, it's true, but that's a lot of work and a lot of money and a lot of setup when maybe, I don't know how well that serves the story, because it's not about Bernstein as a conductor, really.
It's the end of the scene when she's there. I think, that's when they reconcile, I guess, is the end of the scene. The purpose of the scene is the end.
To bring them back together. And it's another one of these great moments. And I love this thing about Cooper's direction is that he'll start with a still image, and then all of a sudden it starts moving and starts giving you more and more information. And in that scene, I don't think you see Felicia until the shot ends on her. It's this very long, deliberate pan over Cooper and close up at times and the orchestra. And then eventually you get to her witnessing his triumph. And then you're right. That's the thing that reconciles them and reunites them. But again, I wonder the wisdom of investing that much in those kinds of moments and maybe not just tying the individual scenes together more cleanly and more unified way. Because you put a big scene like that in a film, it's hard to precede it and follow it. Exactly. And one of the main, I think, faults I see in the film is it's just not linking all these great scenes together or all these meaningful scenes together that brings us more meaning as an audience.
Absolutely. I think the story progression is really one of the biggest problems of the film, isn't it?
But there's another amazing thing is that, again, he's making a bunch of films at once in my mind, because the early parts of the film, everything in black and white really feels like a 1940s, 50s film. The shadows are there, the black and white is there, the colors are there, the smoke is there, the fashion is there.
Isn't it? Yeah.
It's a texture. It's totally the area that they're actually living in. So that's fully appropriate. And then later on, it becomes this sort of 60s, 70s, yellow and orange and pale green colors. And it looks very much like a 60s, 70s film. So it's remarkable filmmaking. And again, I think it contributes to the tone of the film quite a bit, but it doesn't necessarily bring out more and more story. And I think it's just kind of lacking on story, which very often biopics do, because they're really trying to force something narrative and something interesting out of something that's really just daily life and such. But these are extraordinary characters, so they must have an extraordinary life. And I never felt like I got it.
Speaking of getting it, wonderful though many aspects of this film are, I still think there's a couple of things that deserve to be got by our friends at the end of the hotline.
Yeah.
For all the bits we've enjoyed, I'm still going to call the Cliche Squad.
Cliche Squad.
They're going to use one of those old-fashioned telephones too.
Yeah, 1960s telephone. Yeah, it's like a bat phone or something like that. I did enjoy this film. I think the look of it is fantastic. I think I couldn't agree more that it's the storytelling, the one thing that we are most interested in, which tends to let it down. One big simple cliche from me, and maybe it's a little bit unfair, and I know I've talked about it before, but coughing. If any character coughs in a film, they will be dead in the next 5 minutes. I understand. It's a relatively honest little sequence about suffering with cancer. It's a pretty honest portrayal of that kind of death. She has lung secondaries. I quite like the notion of her folding up the tissues because she knows that she's going to be coughing up blood later.
Yeah.
But the whole thing about people smoking all those cigarettes, but they don't actually. Nobody does one single cough until 85 minutes into the film, and then 88 minutes into the film, they've died. That's a little bit too much of a cliche. And then the other one I've put on my list, which is perhaps a bit more of a serious cliche, is a romance between actors played out through a rehearsal, where they have two actors.
Yeah.
Who like they like each other.
Very meta.
But they're exactly. But they're they're playing characters in a rehearsal, so they can say these lovely things to each other without actually, it being their words. It's somebody else's words. I just feel like I've seen that many times before. It's like It's like the first thing people think of when you have two characters who are actors falling in love. Oh, I bet they do a romantic scene from Romeo and Juliet or something like that. Yeah, great, let's do that.
Yeah.
It's just...
I agree, and I think I would also add the party scene, isn't it? Like, it's such a classic when they meet at the party and they go outside and smoke together and talk about their past. A lot of exposition. Oh, great. You just, you know where it's going, isn't it?
We just saw that.
I think it wasn't done, technically it was done beautifully, but in storytelling terms, it wasn't done very well.
It's a little clunky. And we had just seen the same scene in Oppenheimer a couple of months ago. Almost.
Exactly.
It felt like word for word, the very same scene. My first cliche is kind of an anti-cliche. It's that, and I've probably alluded to it already, that you can be a great composer, a great artist without practicing the art whatsoever. And the reason I say it's an anti-cliche is because that cliche actually had to be in here and it wasn't somehow. We don't see him really do anything of composition. He talks about it a little bit, but somehow you need to get some shots of him working or one of these productions going up and scrambling around with Jerome Robbins or whoever he's collaborating with just to make it believable. So that would have helped. It would have helped to have that cliche in there a bit more somehow. This a montage, dare I say, a montage of some composition, some cooperation.
There's nothing wrong with a good montage. I like a montage.
Yeah, exactly. But my cliche, I'm really nitpicking here, but women helping men tie ties.
Oh,
so I wear a tie.
Very good.
Thank you.
Well spotted.
I wear a tie about three days a year. I have to tie a tie, and the other day I did it on the first attempt. I hadn't tied my tie in 8 months, and bam, I had it. Now Leonard Bernstein would have tied a tie by himself thousands of times, and he would actually do some complex bows or Windsor knots. So I just don't buy it, and I understand it. It gets two characters into this nice close up, and it either encourages intimate conversation or awkward silence, but it is a cliche.
Such a cliche. Yeah. And then he says, "Oh, this is nice." It's like, oh no, really? Like the domestic heaven, the wife, doing the ties. Oh my God, really? And again, it feels very much like Oppenheimer, which again, her role was very, very underwritten. So
yes, yeah. I think I do think that I got some of the themes out of this film, and I liked them. I just don't think they were reinforced well enough. So for me, there's this moment where Kuznetsky, the conductor for the Boston Orchestra, suggests that Bernstein changes his name to Burns to be sort of less Jewish, and it's this change of identity which addresses directly this whether you're allowed to be who you truly are in life. And also the other theme, it's totally related of this battle of being born between your inner life of a creator, and it's a quiet and a life of solitude, and the outer life of a performer and a social being. And I like the conflict of themes, but it's a difficult thing to attack because you're actually sort of contradicting yourself when you address those two themes at the same time. And maybe that's the point, this conflict of being a celebrity artist who needs a private life, especially in Bernstein's case, but a private life, both sexually, but also like that artistic thing that we've said is kind of missing here. The guy he is alone in a room composing at the very beginning of the film, which is kind of ironic because you never really see that again later on. But even that moment, he's doing it performatively, right? He's in front of the camera crew. So, I mean, those themes are there, this identity and this battling with who you are and these two very different parts and trying to reconcile them. But I don't know if other people get that. Maybe that's just me.
There's that moment when he's composing Mass. That is quite nice when we see a little bit of composing, but then he finished. And I felt there was no journey of his struggle in terms of his artistry, and that conflict was never really well explored. Yeah. So you have those themes, but again, they're superficial. They're just there lingering, but we don't really... It doesn't go deep enough for us to really understand the actual conflict, the struggle between, being himself. I think the identity is also quite complex, which is beautiful if we think about it, because he's struggling with a lot of things, being a composer, being a conductor, being in the limelight, or being in the quiet space and creating, the block that he must have experienced, the struggle also when he's supporting Felicia through cancer and having to cancel all these concerts, which probably that's how he got his money from, but also like the fact that he was Jewish and also homosexual, but also loving her and the family and supposedly a very good father. Yeah. And those are so, just those inner conflicts are so strong. One of them, you can pick one just for a movie, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And here there's so many, so it's quite difficult to do justice to all of them.
I wrote down on my list what's it about, and I was kind of thinking that I'm sure there is one word which describes, this sensation of being split between two things. And I had to look it up in the dictionary, and the dictionary suggested duplicity. But duplicity kind of, that suggests deception, doesn't it? Yeah. It's not quite duplicity. It's about duality, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
I think that duality is the word, isn't it? It's the lover or the husband, the composer or the conductor, the television personality or the artist, and trying to steer this path between the two. But still, the film itself kind of falls victim to its own duality because it's trying to steer a path between, well, is it a musical film or is it a biopic, or is it talking about a short section of his life or all of his life? Is it about
Drama.
her? Is it about him? Mm-hmm. So even the film cannot escape this kind of duality that it's trying to describe.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Because if you think like Leonard Bernstein. Took a lot more risks, and I felt was much more successful at being all those things, because that's what is extraordinary about him, right? Is that he was successful. He managed to cope and manage all those relationships and all that duality. He was able to do it, to cope with it. And it's interesting that the film doesn't manage that, which he did his entire life.
Yeah.
Which again is very difficult, of course.
Yeah.
I think, Bradley Cooper did a tremendous job. I have to say, when we think that is just his second film, this is incredible. You have some really, really good directing here. I think he falls short in terms of storytelling, but his direction is incredible. The work with the actors, and the production design, cinematography, it's incredible. Really, really is.
And I suppose because he had Spielberg and Scorsese as producers, I wonder whether he had anyone to ask for advice at any point.
Probably.
I should hope so.
Should we? Let's have a break.
Yeah.
We'll kind of stretch our legs, retune our violins, and then come back and talk about West Side Story.
Wonderful.
Oh, excuse me.
Cough away.
Yes. Oh, I can cough.
Two Real Cinema Club is brought to you by the International Association of Apiarists, who ask the question, to be keep or not to be keep? We say keep on beekeeping on. Not only do bees sweeten life for all other beings of planet Earth, they essentially feed us, all through the pollination that enables plant propagation and food production. Yet bees around the world are suffering due to climate change, pollution, and habitat destruction. Without the bee, there ain't no bee for any of we, us. So, support your local apiarists or consider becoming one yourself. You get to wear fashion statements that are both space age and earthy. You can honestly say you get stung a lot. You get to smoke out the houses, and you'll become popular with friends when you share your liquid gold and nectar of the gods as sticky gifts with no stings and no wings attached. So, to beekeep or not to beekeep, be like Barbie Beekeeper. James, do you remember Barbie Beekeeper?
I do remember Barbie Beekeeper, yes.
Be a beekeeper. Even if you fail, you might create some mutant hybrid bee that solves the problems of humans and bees alike. So, the International Association of Apiarists, proud sponsors of the Two Real Cinema Club, want to share this simple message. Humankind, be kind to be kind.
Oh, that's good.
That's lovely.
Did we get it?
I'm going to raise my cup of lemon and honey drink.
I love that.
Cure your ills. Yes, good.
And we're back. I've just been sipping my honey drink, and now I'm not sure whether I feel elated or guilty that we're sponsored by the apiarists. I feel like I've stolen their livelihood. But we are going to talk about the Leonard Bernstein masterpiece. Some people will call it that, West Side Story. So originally a musical in 1958, I think, turned into a film in 1961. I'm guessing you had both seen this film several times?
Yes.
Yes.
Because my cinematic confession, tonight's pod, no, I'd never seen it all the way through.
Oh.
I've seen.
My goodness!
I know exactly. So I saw a stage production probably 20 years ago.
Okay.
I saw a student stage production 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And in my mind, that for all this time, that has been the definitive version. I have never seen the the cinematic version all the way through. I've seen little bits, never sat and watched it all through. So really exciting to see it this week.
Oh, good.
I generally don't like musicals, and I love this. So I came out singing and dancing. Really enjoyed it. But do you want to know why we chose West Side Story to pair up?
I do.
Do you have any other questions for me, Counsel?
Was I the one who decided, or did you decide on this one? Or maybe Ines decided on this one.
No.
I mean, I don't know. The short answer is it's the obvious choice, isn't it? I suppose I was expecting there to be more West Side Story in Maestro.
Yeah.
And there is not.
There was just a little nod, isn't there?
Exactly, yeah. They sort of allude to it very briefly, and then that's about it. Even though this is probably the one piece of work that he is most famous for. In Maestro, they seem to talk about how Bernstein was like the popularizer of classical music for Western television audiences. So maybe if you grew up in the US, you saw him every Sunday night telling you about classical music. But certainly I never picked up on any of that.
Yeah.
I was never aware of that.
Yeah.
The one achievement I'm most aware of him for is West Side Story.
Yeah.
Me too.
I did do a little bit of a read about the background. So the stage musical kind of started out in 1949 as East Side Story. So even back then it was based on Romeo and Juliet, but it was playing on tensions between an Irish Catholic family and a Jewish family on Manhattan's Lower East Side. Jerome Robbins, so he was like choreographer of The King and I, Funny Girl. And then Bernstein and Arthur Lawrence, who wrote Rope for Hitchcock. So they were all involved. The project didn't come to anything. It was abandoned for 6 years. And then in 1955, Lawrence was asked to work on an adaptation of Serenade. He got Bernstein and Robbins involved again. Bernstein just wanted to do the music now. He'd been introduced to Stephen Sondheim. And at the time, the big story in the news was gang-related violence. So they thought, well, let's rework East Side Story to be about LA gangs. So it's going to be about Los Angeles gangs. But Laurent said he was more familiar with Puerto Rican gangs in New York, so it went back across the country to Manhattan, and it became West Side Story. The musical was produced on a pretty tight budget. It was seen as incredibly modern, very groundbreaking, swept the Tonys in 1958. So there's a lot of interest in turning it into film. But Jerome Robbins, who does make like a really brief appearance, doesn't he, in Maestro? So he was the choreographer, but he had very little film experience. So they grabbed Robert Wise to co-direct. Now, I was never quite aware of what an incredible career Robert Wise had. So, I was aware of West Side Story. I was aware that he directed Sound of Music. I didn't know that he was the editor of Citizen Kane.
Wow, I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
And Ernest Lehman, who wrote the script as well, he did The Sound of Music and North by Northwest, the writer, who adapted the film from the play.
Yeah.
And then,
really incredible. They worked together. Yeah.
Robert Wise directed The Andromeda Strain, just one of my favourites as a boy. Great movie. He directed the first Star Trek feature film in like 1979, something like that. I mean, what an amazing, utterly incredible career.
Yeah.
But he had the reputation as being a bit safe pair of hands. So they kind of arranged that Robbins would shoot the dance scenes first, and then Wise would follow in, and he'd shoot the dramatic scenes. But they got to 45 days into shooting, and Robbins was already something like 23 days behind schedule. So he got sacked, basically. And then Wise finished filming like the remaining dance sequences with Robbins' assistants, although apparently that they remained in contact on the phone, and so he took Robbins' advice about something. Interesting, the casting for the film. Do you know who was approached for the role of Tony in West Side Story?
Nope.
Everybody, basically. Elvis was approached. Warren Beatty was approached. Burt Reynolds, Anthony Perkins was asked to do it. Marlon Brando was asked to do it. Everybody. It's very interesting.
Why did they turn it down, I wonder?
Yeah. I don't know whether were all those guys very confident about singing. I don't know. Interestingly, this was when Warren Beatty was young enough that the producers had to see his show reel. And it was when they watched his showreel that they saw Natalie Wood. I can't remember what she was making with him at the time. And that was how she got cast as Maria. I didn't know until today. Natalie Wood, well, I was figured out that she was not Puerto Rican. I did not know that she is a child of Russian immigrants. So Natalie Wood is Russian.
Yeah, she did From Here to Eternity, Rebel Without a Cause.
The Searchers is what I know Natalie Wood for. She was in that, wasn't she?
Searchers,
Yeah, of course. Very young.
It won 10 Oscars in 1961. And my favourite bit of trivia, apparently West Side Story was reportedly Michael Jackson's favourite film.
That should come as no surprise, yeah.
I think cause after you've seen the video for Beat It and I suppose it Bad as well, like they're both kind of basically sort of street gangs, kind of violence, dancing. It's it's West Side Story, isn't it?
Yeah, we could see it, isn't it? Yeah, interesting.
Shall I tell you the story then?
Yes, please.
The story. My synopsis is always much shorter than Andrew's, so I've just done it as like 3 little sentences. But I could have done it in 3 words, couldn't I? Romeo and Juliet. Manhattan gang violence is the 1950s basis for this film adaptation of the hit stage musical based on the story of Romeo and Juliet. So Tony is a young man trying to put his gang life in the jets behind him. Maria is a teenager ready to fall in love, even though her brother Bernardo is gang leader of the Sharks and keeps a close eye on who his sister dances with. And when Tony and Maria meet, they're smitten, but tensions between the Jets and the Sharks get in the way, leading to a fight and a tragedy that might keep the young couple apart forever. Is it possible to spoil Romeo and Juliet? I don't know if it is. A number of people die in the end. I mean, actually, interestingly, probably an incorrect number of people die at the end of this film, but a number of important characters die. So I was going to say, I wasn't sure I was going to enjoy this film, but I really did. I enjoyed it a lot. It's over 60 years old. It's old-fashioned. It's melodramatic. I can't deny that. But the music, the dancing, the look of the thing, just like with Maestro, it was the look. It won me over. It carried, I was carried away far further than I expected. It's breezy, it's witty, it's fast-moving, it's kinetic. This is a great fun film still.
I agree.
Universal agreement on this. Yeah.
It's such an iconic film, isn't it? It's just so, I don't know. I think it stands the test of time, didn't you think?
Yeah.
Well, probably that's why Spielberg did the remake. It
amazes me how contemporary, like the concerns of the film.
Exactly. When they're so current.
Yeah, exactly. I like the song "La La 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 America." It's about immigration and inflation and racism and border control. It feels it could have been written this year. Unbelievable,
I
really,
know.
isn't it?
I was just thinking about that Irish incident that was so awful, and now the refugees in the UK alone. I was just, it's so current, and it's very depressing that it's still happening, but it's just so well written. That song is beautiful, and I read that actually Rita Moreno, who plays Anita, helped change some of the lyrics to make it less offensive. Yes, because she felt that was quite offensive towards Puerto Rico, and she was a Puerto Rican native, and when she first read the script, she didn't accept the role until they changed some of the lyrics of that. Imagine Stephen Sondheim. I found it that quite like being told by Rita Moreno, "Hey, you have to change this," and I thought that was great. When you look at the uber talented creative team of this, and the fact they were able to collaborate and change things and being generous and open enough, it was quite special. I think that's why this film was such a success.
I mean, that song America is absolutely fantastic. Every word is perfect, isn't it? It's so tight.
Incredible.
Not a syllable is wasted. It's just really beautifully written. Real outstanding. But also there's kind of real Black Lives Matter material, isn't there? Or it's like Latino Lives Matter. But I mean, the whole police brutality and racism thing, and also, something else which I didn't really realise at all. So there's one of the Jets characters is this character who's called a tomboy, at the time, but you look with a modern eye, and clearly, well, either she's gay, or she is transgender. This is, I think, the sweetest moment in the film. Actually, this maybe kind of just brought a little moistness to my eye. In the second act, she is the one who finds Tony, and all the way through the film, all the gang have all been telling her, "You're a girl, go and put on a dress. You're a girl, no one wants you." And then she finds Tony, and like Ice, the leader of the Jets, he tells her, "You done good, buddy boy." And she has this lovely smile. You kind of think, "Oh, look, it's like she's been acknowledged for who she really is." It's just so sweet. It's just a lovely,
moving, isn't it? And that is, again, even that you can see the journey of the character. Everything she always wanted to be, they finally acknowledged that in the second act. So it's when we were talking before about Maestro and the lack of sort of journey and the storytelling. This has it all in that respect.
Yeah. Do you remember the name of that character?
She's called Anybody's.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant, really brilliant.
Anybody's. Yeah. It's brilliant. I mean, that's a very early transgender role and a great story on its own.
Come on, this was done in 1960s. It is incredible to think like that.
Yeah. There are things to not like about it as well, I think. But it all ends up being so well done that you don't worry about it too much. But, I think the racism is pretty honestly addressed here. The Puerto Ricans are the newest group of immigrants, so they're low on the rung of the ladder. And then the implication for me was that a lot of the Jets are actually children of immigrants, but maybe born in New York, so they're sort of just a generation removed from their parents in that way, and the immigrant experience. But and then the open hostility and racism of the police towards the PRs, they start calling them the PRs, right? Is in there. There's this weird little double racism thing too, because one of the Puerto Rican gang members, one of the sharks, is called Chino, which is basically just calling a kid Chinese. Which ironically still happens today. I've got a group of students from Angola, and they're convinced that one of their friends looks Chinese, so they call him Chino. Yeah. So it goes on to this today, but it's very interesting that that's in there as well. The Spanish is really rough because a lot of those actors are not native Spanish speakers, I don't think. So the accents are pretty bad, as you said, Natalie.
That's one of the biggest flaws I felt. That and the makeup, how they darken their skin is so bad. So
a little weird.
bad.
So and ironically, the lip syncing is fantastic because very few of those people are actually singing, I think. So
I think Natalie Wood was dubbed, right? Yeah.
Richard Baymar's Tony has someone. But it's actually really good lip syncing, so that kind of covers for it. But I mean, those are the things to sort of dislike or to criticize, but they're not story things, right? You're working from Shakespeare. The story's solid. It's proven. So the things to dislike are the racism you can dislike, but it's actually very honest for probably the 1950s New York City.
I agree.
And then you guys both mentioned America. There's this wonderfully awful scene at Docks where Rita Moreno's character, that's Anita, I believe, goes to deliver a message, but she changes her message after she's essentially raped. It's like a musical rape.
Assaulted, so awful.
And it's this intense moment, but if you listen to the music, it's America getting warped and uglier and uglier. It just becomes this cacophonic mess, this chaos of what was originally a beautiful tune or a really fun tune. It becomes really warped. And that's just a great scene, both musically and visually, and you know exactly what's happening, but it's not as graphic as it might be in a scene today or in a scene that's not in a musical. And
she's so distraught because it's also her American dream that's being broken. It's everything that is being broken is about her being assaulted, it's her as a woman being, raped, but also about the dream. She was always more hopeful than her boyfriend Bernardo about America. She had this American dream very much alive, and he dies there and then on that scene, and it's just beautiful how it all comes together. Very sad, but it's such a powerful scene.
I think for me, one thing that really strikes me is that I know more about Bernstein from this film than I think I know from Maestro.
Interesting.
Because it's an incredibly complex piece of music. It's groundbreaking. It captures a lot of different moods. and captures the times as well as those neighborhoods. And it's wonderful. I'm not as big a fan of Stephen Sondheim and never have been, so the lyrics sometimes don't work as much for me, but the music is so strong. And you can feel all that work that we're missing in Maestro. You can feel all that work just listening to this, because this film it's Leonard Bernstein for me. It's just very much his masterpiece.
You know, the mix of like it's jazzy, bluesy, Latin. It's just so like the Latin dance. It's just incredible. Like the music is.
There's this wonderful. I guess it's probably a reprise of Tonight, and it's they're preparing for the Rumble, and Maria and Tony are preparing for the rest of their lives together, basically. And it's this beautiful blend of violence and beauty, and it's confusing. It's love and it's hate all at once, and it's done musically, it's done visually, it's done with the characters. And again, that's not an easy thing to balance. We were talking about balancing things in the other film. That's a fantastic movie moment, and it's balanced really expertly.
I was telling you earlier I wanted to see more montage. That scene kind of works as a montage. It's beautifully coordinated, just incredible.
Yes.
Absolutely. I've got a question for the both of you. So, for all that we were kind of commenting that a lot of the concerns of the film seem surprisingly modern, still applicable in 2024. One song that kind of stands out as being different is the Officer Krupke song. But I don't know whether that felt the same way to you. Yeah. That for all the progress we see in other bits of the movie, that Officer Krupke song, it's well structured and it's amusing, but it's pretty reactionary, isn't it? It's kind of the whole thing is lampooning the notion that it is society that creates antisocial behaviour. I was almost to the extent that I was half expecting them to start singing, "Oh, what a snowflake," tidy your room and go and listen to a podcast by that nice Dr. Peterson. It just felt like quite different in tone to the rest of the songs.
Yeah, you're right. I haven't seen Spielberg's version yet, but I wonder if he kept that song. Because I know he changed quite a few of the songs.
Right, okay. I mean, it is one of the most memorable songs.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And also it gives birth to one of the most memorable gags in Curb Your Enthusiasm, if you've ever seen that.
Yes, I was about to mention that Larry David uses it too. Yeah, I think it definitely sort of makes fun, maybe uncomfortably so, about social workers and mental illness, and it does not seem.
It feels very dated.
Yeah, it does feel quite dated. But again, maybe accurate for the times, of course.
Okay.
Yes.
We're looking back at this 60 years later. And
it also says you can kind of editorialise it, because you can say, well, these are the attitudes of the Jets, not the attitudes of the writers of the song.
Yeah, that's true too. You're putting words in the characters' mouths. Yeah, I think on another level, the photography is fantastic. They're using lots of closed spaces. It's a project that's big enough for film, yet the spaces are tight and confined enough to convey this sort of suffocation and tension. So it's a good example of art direction and cinematography that really support the story, as opposed to art direction that might be there just to wow the audience or the viewer.
Yeah.
And I think that's again. It looks so wonderful.
Credit to Bradley Cooper. I think that worked really well in Maestro as well. It works better here because it has a stronger story to support it. But I think Maestro also worked well in that respect.
I mean, there's a real palpable sense of place in both of these films, isn't there? They do kind of. These are both New York films that are proud to be New York films, without necessarily showing you all the obvious bits of New York.
Yeah, but one is very much upper West Side, and the other one is.
It does. I mean, I realise most of the story is stolen from Shakespeare, but it does kind of use some of the traditional advices of it limits the time frame. The whole thing happens over 48 hours, doesn't it? It limits the locations. It all happens in quite tight geographical space. I do wonder whether it slightly dips in the third act, and the pacing maybe could be slightly, but if it was me, I might have cut a song or two towards the end of the film and just kind of I might have chipped. There's a song between Anita and Maria. I can't remember which the song is, but when they're in her kind of bedroom.
I am pretty. Is it pretty?
No. After that,
later on, the third act.
Yeah. After Bernardo is killed. I can't remember the name of the song, but I was thinking, you know what, this song is kind of slowing things down, actually, where we need to get to the climax now. But, who am I to start nitpicking a 60-year-old film? It's a masterpiece. It's fantastic. Well, one interesting thing I wrote down in my notebook, towards the end of the film, Doc he tells Tony, "You kids, why do you all live your lives like you're at war?" Because they're all just living so very fast, aren't they? They're meeting and falling in love and pretending to get married and then dying all over a 48-hour period. And it occurred to me, well, the musical was actually created just, barely a decade after the Second World War. People probably did live faster then, didn't they, I think? It's a product of the times.
Yeah, definitely. And it captures it on a personal level, too. I think that's the reason it was probably quite successful, because people could see
it's
the
interesting. Because, I watched this film, probably 2 to 3 times before, but then I watched it again before the podcast, and I found myself cry, like not sobbing, but I had like tears when Tony dies, that scene of her. I was like, oh my God, and then when she stands up, because I felt a stronger connection to Anita than I felt to Maria most of the times. Every time I watched it, I thought she was more interesting, more powerful, that Maria was a bit more passive. But that is the scene, the ending is when Maria comes to life, even though he's dead, is when she finally feels she has the courage to face the gangs and put an end to it, which is quite interesting. And very, very moving. And the scene is so incredibly shot. When there's one of the, I don't know if it's one of the jets that puts the headscarf over her, and then she walks behind, this young widow behind, she's not really a widow because she didn't marry, but behind the coffin, but not the coffin again, behind him, his body, and all the gang starts dispersing and connecting that to the opening shot, which was all the gang coming together in that same space, I think it was. So it's just beautiful filmmaking, really, really astonishing.
I love the way that the gangs fight, of course, is through dance. Yeah. So it's not that violent by today's standards, and the choreography is fantastic. Yeah, you're seeing guys fighting, but they are dancers, and there's so much artistry in the casting, because you're looking for people who can at least act a little bit, many of whom can sing, many of whom can dance. So it's like we're seeing that artistry in every scene of this film, where it's the same kind of artistry that I thought was lacking in Maestro, ironically. I just love that. I love the beauty of the violence in this film. I guess that's the way it's done. It's just that it's artful. It's really artful. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a great film. I mean, it's definitely not for the young people, I don't think. I feel it makes me feel older that I love this film so much. But I think it's worth loving for sure. It's a great film.
I didn't watch it with my children. I wonder whether maybe we should try it, actually, because I wonder whether they might enjoy it more than you think. Yeah. I wonder whether they might.
They might, yeah.
I think they might enjoy it. Yeah, I think so too.
Right. Well, a lot of characters on screen. Great to have a guest, because you can also join in on our favourite game. Let's play Who Am I?
Who am I?
So like, I kind of always, I feel like one of the reasons that we go to the cinema at all, the reason that art exists, is because we want to see ourselves on the screen. I think, and it's kind of our artistic duty, I suppose, to show the audience themselves. It's why we go. Did either of you see yourselves on screen this week?
Yes.
Oh, good, excellent. Next question.
Go, Andres. Leonard Bernstein, for sure, you will say.
I'm going to go a little bit against expectation this week, because I know that James always looks at a doctor and he immediately thinks of himself as that person. Which is, I understand that. It's a little easy, though. So this week, I'm going to go for the doctor. Doc, who owned the general store where the kids hung out. The Jets did.
I love that
He's
character.
cranky. He's old. He's incapable of understanding the teenagers he serves, his customers. And he just doesn't understand the changes in the world, as you've just mentioned, and this dissolution of society. So I'm sort of a composite of Doc, but I also feel Baby John. Baby John was like crying all the time. He was scared, and he was slow to warm to this sense of violence. I don't think he really wanted to rumble at all, and I think that's me too. So I'm somewhere between the young Baby John, I love it, the Baby John, and the old Doc.
Exactly midway between those two characters.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
See, we were talking about duality. That's your duality. You are both Doc and Baby John at the same time.
Exactly.
I'm definitely not the Doctor this time. That guy in Maestro, he clearly never went to any of the Breaking Bad news lectures that I went to. That guy is terrible at Breaking Bad news. Oh my God!
It was a sweet scene, though. He was handsy. He had his hand on her knee immediately.
He was like kneeling and everything. I mean, it was all that was kind of
very 50s style. 70s. Yeah.
They don't teach us to do it like that. That's just wrong. That's like every bit of that was wrong. Interestingly, you know who I put down for Who Am I this week? I wrote down I see a bit of myself in Leonard Bernstein. Am I a great composer? No, of course not. Am I an inspiring conductor? Clearly not. Am I a philandering gay man with a roving eye? No, nothing as interesting as that. But am I sometimes a bit of a selfish egomaniac? Okay, maybe we've got something there. I mean, you know, this is not a comparison that reflects the best sides of my personality or the parts of myself that I am proudest of, but you know, what film worth its salt would only address the good things? I think there is a bit of Bernstein in me. I recognise, you know, that kind of selfish egotism sometimes. You know, I spot that in that guy in the mirror. I'm guessing my get out is there is an element of that in all people. Yeah. I know there is in me.
That was very therapeutical.
Very good.
You guys are going to have to start charging me by the hour, aren't you? Yes. Ines, did you see yourself this week?
Yes, I did. I think I mentioned just now, I think Anita was one of the characters. There's a sense, you know, having been an immigrant for many years, I felt there was, you know, there is that duality that we were talking about, but you never, you know, the sense of home and the sense of who you are, not feeling entirely Portuguese, not feeling entirely British. And you almost, you know, you want to belong to the place where you live, but you also long your home, even though you don't feel connected to it in the same way as when you grew up, which is the same feelings that she's trying to explain in America. And then that disillusion, I guess, that when you have those dreams and they're shattered or the opportunities do not present themselves in the way that you wanted them to be. So, yeah, I could connect with, you know, she's much stronger character than I am. but there were so many things that I could feel about her struggle and that I could really relate. I think I would be closer to Anita.
She's also, like you, a winner of an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony. So I think you'll get there someday.
Yes.
Someday.
AKA Somewhere. No, that's not her song. That's Maria's song.
Oh, oops.
Somewhere, somehow.
Right, let's. We'll play our overly long jingle then. So we'll see whether we can. I think we've done half this work already. Let's see if we can bring the two films together. We'll do our synthesis. Let's see what happens.
Synthesis is like a transformative music. Right?
That was so good. I'm not even going to dub the music in this time. Yeah, I think it was that. That's brilliant.
No, we need that. We need it.
So for my notebook this week, I wrote a little mini essay about this. It's only about 4 sentences. I'm going to read it out though because you two are much better at talking off the top of your head, whereas I'm terrible with the words.
No, I'm not. So we'll just stick to.
So I wrote down organic chemistry : one of the basic properties of matter. Right, is left or right-handedness. Did you like study chemistry at school? There's this kind of this right or left-handedness of all molecules. This notion that mirror images of things cannot be superimposed on each other. I think these films are about the same idea, about duality, about two-ness. And I wrote underneath. Oppenheimer, I think, wanted to also be about some fundamental property of the universe, but it couldn't quite figure out which one, so it ended up mostly being about having sex in an armchair.
Totally.
But these two films, I think, really succeed. So they are both about they're about two-ness. It's jets versus sharks, composer versus conductor, lies versus honesty, these immigrants versus those immigrants in a country where every character that we see on screen is actually an immigrant. Two-ness is a fundamental property of all things in the universe. So it's like such a valuable practical idea to explore in any art. It's one of those characteristics that is at the heart of everything, including, I think, and this is what I wrote at the bottom of my little paragraph, public discourse at the moment. And I think this is one of the big things that I think is wrong with the whole blooming world, is that there is a little bit too much duality and too much resistance to meeting in the middle. We are over there or we're over here, but we don't meet in that no man's land in between. We don't talk to the other people. And that's what's wrong with 2024, I think. And I think both these films sort of are about that same thing. Yeah. But that's the end of my essay. I don't know whether did you feel the two films kind of shared themes?
Absolutely.
I think you started very well. I think that's it. For me, it was about that early theme statement in Maestro of society wanting us to be one thing, even if we want to be something else. The Sharks want Tony to fight, or I guess the Jets want Tony to fight. He wants to get out of the gang life. Maria sees Tony as different, and she even calls him inexplicably Anton. I thought she would say Antonio or something there, but she calls him Anton.
I didn't understand that, why she doesn't call him Antonio. And even at the end, she said, Te adoro, Anton.
Te adoro, Anton. Which maybe is fun because it just shows how badly society understands us as individuals, perhaps. Yeah. So I think, there are these different ways of looking at ourselves and how we're seen. These different ways of looking at an artist and knowing them. As I said, I see Bernstein through West Side Story, and ironically, I don't see him quite as clearly through the Maestro pick, and how we understand ourselves through like the exposition of our own lives versus the relationships that we have to other people, because I think that is kind of what is at the heart of Maestro. Yeah. For me, there are a couple other things, though, too. I'll do the serious one first, I guess. I think there's an exploration of masculinity in both of these films, and it's very funny in West Side Story because I don't consider any of those gang members particularly masculine. And when you're casting for those certain qualities, you don't get a lot of buff gang type members. I'd be interested to see,
especially not Bernardo, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'd be interested to see Spielberg's version because maybe he's got more rounded and muscular characters. But I got to say that I long for a world where gay choreographers, composers, and lyricists can dictate the motions, motivations, and meditations of urban gang life, specifically, and American men in generally. So there's this bizarre toxic masculinity meditation in these two films that I think is there, perhaps partly by accident, partly by casting, and very much by intention, though, I think, as well. And Maestro needs some snapping. There's so much snapping in West Side Story. I love it. And if Maestro had snapping, that film would have kicked ass. So that's my other thought on synthesizing the two.
Yeah, I think I would add we've already talked about it, and I think it's about identity and also like how aspirations and reality clash. I think both films touch upon those subjects, even though they don't really explore them deep enough, especially in Maestro's case. But identity is very much also present on both of them. Mm-hmm. That's it. Don't have anything to add after both your essays. Thanks very much for leaving me with nothing.
No, I would say well done. They're definitely about identity. There's no question about that. And I think again, it's almost like tall orders. It's identity, but you're also working with duality, so it just confuses things. And, that's life. Life is supposed to be confusing. It shouldn't be that neat. But in your films, I think it's great when the theme comes through really, really clearly. And I think both of them do that quite well. Mm-hmm. I wish Maestro were a little stronger and a little more clear, but hats off to Bradley Cooper and the whole gang, because that is still quite an achievement.
Yeah. I mean, they definitely knew what they wanted to talk about, isn't it? It's not like they entered the film and sort of figured out halfway through what the theme was. Or no, I mean, they clearly understand what they're trying to talk about.
I think it's wise that they end on Bernstein just conducting, because then you see the man, the amount of energy, the sweat that goes into those performances. I've substitute taught for some conductors before. Conducting is not easy. It's really, really hard, and it's super technical.
I can't believe you kept this until the very end of the podcast. So you are also a conductor.
No.
You didn't say that right at the start. I would have changed everything I said.
Very bad. Very bad. And you need two great hands, and it's incredibly physical. That's why the guy is sweating like that. I mean, a big piece might be 40, 50 minutes long, and you're there waving your arms around and trying to focus for long stretches very intensely, and you are in charge of anywhere from 40 to 100 people playing on stage. It's incredible. So I'm glad they ended the film, and I guess they opened the credits with him conducting, and I thought that was a wise move. And the credits actually in both films are really interesting. I love the credits, the end credits especially in West Side Story.
Yeah.
Where you're seeing the graffiti and the names are sort of emerging from
good.
this scribbling on walls and stuff, and it's brilliant. And even the opening credits where they just, you're looking at these little stick figure drawings in West Side Story for 5 minutes while basically this wonderful overture that encapsulates much of the great score in 5 minutes is playing on the screen before you, and then it sort of morphs into New York City. I mean, some just fantastic credit work on both films.
Yeah. There's so much artistry in both films. It's incredible. If you think about it, it's really, really outstanding. We don't see that many films with that level, I feel.
You're right.
Unfortunately.
Well, speaking of not seeing that many films, we've just got time to talk about also playing at this theatre. Well, I think we should only be polite and let guests go first.
Yes.
What else have you seen this week?
You only let me go first because I've seen nothing. Thanks very much, James. One thing that I did watch was the new season of Slow Horses. Have you seen that series? It's so good.
Now, this is Apple TV, is that right?
Yes, on Apple TV. And it's just very, very good with, I don't want to talk too much about the series, but is with Gary Oldman. Gary Oldman.
Right.
And he's the lead. He leads this group of spies that are like renegades of MI5 called Slow Horses. And it's just a typical spy thriller, but it's very, very well done. And the characters are great. The dialogue is great. The story, the progression, and it's just fun. It's just a very well-made series. And it's very engaging. And the last episode was, I think, on Wednesday. So that was really, really great. I really enjoyed that. I recommend. Ooh. It's just a fun experience. It's not like a series that would, it's not like Breaking Bad or anything like that. Ooh. But it's just a great watch.
We've just got a 3-month free trial of Apple TV, so I'm making a mental list of all the things we need to quickly watch before we need to start paying for it.
Yeah, make the most of it. Yeah, that was very good.
Andres?
I'm glad you mentioned not serious stuff, because the only thing I think I've sort of seen, mostly through osmosis, walking through the room, is what my wife has been watching, is Project Runway. It's like a fashion reality thing. And yeah, that's it. I see bits and pieces. It's like so foreign to my world because I really don't care about fashion, and I find the whole creation of just these extravagant pieces of clothing that no one will ever really wear. I think it's just one of these wastes of human invention. But I want to be empathetic to the contestants and the judges who take it very seriously. So the thing about these series is very often they do grab me on, and the Great British Baking Show is the worst one. I can't get through an episode without crying puddles of tears.
I love that one.
I think Great most British of these shows are very good at getting the human
Andres, you pressed the mute button, I believe.
Wait a second. Let's send him a text message. Wait a second.
Dorente, we can't hear you.
It may have said something like extremely profound here, yes.
Exactly. I sobbed when the model was going through the catwalk.
I'm so disappointed it's not about building a new part of an airport, which really it should be. Like, that I would like to see. So while we're waiting, I'll quickly do my
Do it.
I'll do my also playing. So I'm going to buck the trend. I actually watched a film this week.
Did you?
Yeah, unlike you guys, I watched The Vast of Night. It's a 2019 super low budget 1950s science fiction film. It's made for I think $700,000. So it's a low budget, not super low, micro budget, but low budget. And it has some absolutely incredible scenes in it. It can't quite stick the landing. It's set in the 1950s. It all happens kind of at night in a small town. And people start seeing lights in the sky. But most of the story is told through the point of view of this 16-year-old girl who works as a telephone operator. And there is especially one outstanding 15-minute scene. I timed it. It's 15 minutes. The camera does not cut away. It's all a single take. It's just her on the switchboard, plugging and unplugging her cables, and connecting different people to the radio station and hearing their story, and then connecting somebody else and talking to the guy at the radio station, and then picking up this strange noise. It's just 15 minutes in a single take. Brilliant, fantastic scene. So skillfully made. Really good. And then there's one other really outstanding tracking shot again, which I guess they put most of the budget into. So this tracking shot that tracks right across this small town, in the middle of the night. Really, really brilliant.
Oh, wow.
It can't quite stick the landing, unfortunately, but it's a really interesting film.
Sounds great. Am I back? Can you hear me?
You are back.
Okay.
You are back. Yay. Did you accidentally mute, or was what you were telling us far too serious for our ears?
I was getting very excited. I felt like I was running down the runway myself. I kicked the wire right out of my microphone, and that automatically... That mutes the actual Google Meet as well. So it took me a little while to figure that one out. But I'm back. Oh, life. But life is stories, and that's what Project Runway does pretty well. They get into the stories of the various characters, and as we've seen, it's not easy to do in narrative. It's not easy to do in real life. So I didn't watch anything else.
I always find those reality programs have really good editors, right? Probably editing is
precisely.
That's how they tell the story, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, first day of the new year, first podcast of the new year. Couple of good films to start with. Not bad. A year's off to a good start.
That's right.
Ines, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me.
How wonderful to do a podcast with an intelligent person who has something to say. That makes a real change for Andres and me.
Sim, obrigado.
I hope you will enjoy. You will join us at the popcorn counter next week, where we'll talk about, I don't know, some old nonsense. Until then, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We will see you next time. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.